Ali Braid, over 18 and a half years in the recruitment industry, which I love. Have run my own training consultancy for just over 5.5 years now. And I've also been in that support sort of function as well. So I've done internal recruitment, I've looked after facilities, HR. So I feel like I've got a nice rounded experience from that point of view. Director of operations, so hopefully I'm picking the good bits from everything I've seen within that career. So it was by accident, but I'd actually applied when I left teaching. I applied to all sorts of sales jobs, and I'd done sales through university and when I was at school. So marketing, advertising space, all that kind of thing as a sort of as a graduate. And I actually was asked to interview by a rec-to-rec agency. So they'd already got me some interviews, and then they said, oh, would you interview for this particular client? And I hadn't thought about it, but I hadn't been totally enamoured with the other types of sales for various reasons. So I went for a couple of interviews, and the more people I met and the more I found out about recruitment made me think, well, yeah, maybe I can do this. And was offered a job, and they were like, look, we think you can do this, but you've got to really want it. And that kind of started that ambition, I suppose, to sort of prove myself really and go, look, I can do this. So I was sort of that L&D role was sort of created for me, which was amazing. Quite quickly I realised that melded the sales background I had plus the training background. But I had to prove myself as a recruiter for 5 years, nearly 5 years. Then they were like, right, you're ready to be a trainer. I'd done on-desk training, unit training, all of that. So then I moved into that L&D role. The internal recruiter at the time had gone on maternity leave, so it was a bit like, oh, well, Ali can do that bit as well. But you know what? I loved it. It was great. It was very different to recruiting senior management accounts into the NHS. But I learnt a lot. So I did that alongside the training. So quite often, certainly for our London office at the time, I'd met and I'd interviewed some of the people that I was then training. So that was quite nice to see them sort of coming through in that way. I think the business I was in at the time, it was unusual, to have an L&D team internally, and a lot of staff got poached because of that, because they knew they'd had that initial foundations within that business and then were taken on, into other companies. So I think it was unusual, and I think as we've seen over the last couple of years with the pandemic, those support functions are maybe not valued or haven't been valued in the way that they should be. But I do think the tables are turning. I think people are understanding that need to learn, that continuous learning as an adult is really important. And, that's why we've done, soda bread and lockdowns and gardening, and we as a species need to learn. So I think it's really interesting to sort of see those tables turned and companies suddenly going, oh my gosh, we need this, we need someone to come in, and we need someone to join the business permanently. yeah. So I think that things are definitely changing, which is good. Yeah, I think there is an element of obviously budget and scale, and I think where you are as a business and how much you want to grow and in what period of time. And I think as well, it's moving away from that, oh good, well we'll get an L&D team in and we tick that box, or we'll get a consultant in and we'll tick that box. You know, there's got to be those long-term goals, and then you work back from those and go, well, how are we going to get there? And I think, yeah, you know, I think in a lot of businesses, actually, you know, internal is the way to go. You know, you should have someone embedded in that business, but that's another cost. Which, if you're a small to medium-sized business, especially, you feel you probably can't afford, which is obviously when I come in. So I think there's a lot of variables really that you have to investigate as a business. But either way, there's a solution for you out there. But you've got to get it right. Don't do either. Don't have me in or someone internal if that's not what you need. So I think you've got to look at where the business is going. Yeah, I think much like a recruiter, there's time pressures obviously within a recruitment process. And I think as an L&D consultant, you are also quite constrained by time. You don't have much time with people. You can't just pop over to their desk and see what they're doing and ask them how things are going, because you're just not there all the time. So I think for me, one of the skills that I'm always developing is really to get to know people as quickly and efficiently, I have to say, as possible. And I know that sounds a bit clinical, but it allows me to really get a sense of what their strengths are, what they need to work on, because I'm there to make a difference, so I've got to do that quite quickly for them. And yeah, that's how I would describe really one of the main skills. There's loads. You've still got to be tenacious. You've still got to be persistent. You've still got to have, that thick skin, and especially as a business owner as well. Things don't always go to plan, but that's okay. That's life. Mm-hmm. I think ultimately everybody needs support and development, and it doesn't matter if you're a recruiter or a resourcer, or you're the managing director, or you manage a team. We can all improve, or a business owner. We can all improve. And again, I think there's a slight change in how recruitment leaders are prepared to be perceived. I think 10, 15 years ago, there was perhaps this need to look like you had all the answers. And I think actually in the last 2 years, that kind of mindset has had to change, because none of us knew the answers about anything. So I think that's, for me, that's been quite interesting to watch, and that recruitment leaders now are more likely to go, actually, Ali, I would like your advice on this. What would you do? Have you seen this before? Whereas perhaps 10, 15 years ago, you wouldn't have been having those conversations. Perhaps, obviously, I wasn't doing what I do now then, but that's how I imagine it's changed over the years. And which is good, obviously, because it shows everybody that works for you that development never stops. You can always be that little bit better. I think in terms of doing better, I think most businesses now, especially this year, know they need to be doing something, and if your staff haven't had any development opportunities over the last 2 or so years, then you are going to be behind, because your competitors probably will be. So I think kind of getting it ahead of that and looking at trends and looking at what's working, but also just having those discussions as a business, you know, celebrating the wins. I think training, and I often say this to people I'm working with, you know, we talk a lot about what's going wrong, but you know, companies that have been going for however long are obviously doing something right. So let's analyse that and let's replicate it as much as possible. You're not having to reimagine recruitment every morning, you know, thank God, that'd be exhausting. But, you know, we can look back at trends and patterns within a business and go, oh, well, actually, we got that job on that way, or we found that candidate through that route. And it's just being open, I think, as well, and aware of how that business is running and what does work within that market, and not feeling like, oh, we should be doing something different, you know, because usually you don't need to. You just need to do more of this good stuff. But it's not been analysed, it's not been, it's not been identified properly within a business usually. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think obviously it's a route I took and I loved it. I think much like internal recruitment sometimes has this image of, oh, it'll be easy, you know. And what I found doing L&D and internal, but still doing L&D, is your client just sits over there. So in some ways the pressure is more intense, because you're always with that client. You know, you sit with that client, they're behind you, they're on the you know, they're next door. So I think that's sometimes probably quite surprising for people, and they don't imagine that there's going to be a pressure. So yes, you don't have KPIs in the same way as a recruiter, but you will still have goals to reach and objectives, you know, to reach in terms of how your training affects the business. So it's pressure, but it's a different kind of pressure.